returner, kick returner.
Mm-hmm.
You saw plenty of bodies back there at mini camp.
Yeah.
Where do those two spots stand going into Wednesday?
Well, it's still up in the air, of course. Obviously we have an incoming guy. If you're talking about punt returner first, we have an incoming guy in Trent, who's been a solid guy for us back there. I think we're probably trying to push the roster flexibility a little bit. That's why we drafted Charlie. We'll get a good opportunity to see him, extensively in the preseason to see, I'm sure, what he can do in the return game and on offense. So that's kind of a fluid spot. It's a spot that's open for a great deal of competition. I hope selfishly that the opponents punt a lot in the preseason game, so we can see somebody bubble up right there. Much in the same fashion we saw Alex Erickson do that several years ago, and so that's a fluid spot, as is the kickoff return spot. That's going to become a very important position for us now. Not only to have a playmaker, but to have a good decision maker with some of these rule changes that have come into play here all of a sudden. So that's going to be a very, very important spot. And we got a couple candidates here. Chris Evans will be one. Travion will have an opportunity to show what he can do there. Charlie can do that also. And I don't want to forget Kwame Lassiter. Was a rising player for us a year ago that came in, had a good camp, earned a spot in our practice squad, and so we've got several capable guys back there that can do both of those spots.
When you evaluate that specific spot returner,
Okay.
is there a certain attribute that you value the most that you really look for with those guys?
Well, I think they're very different, both of those spots. If I'm looking at a punt returner, obviously the first thing they got to do is be able to handle the ball cleanly. Be able to catch a punt is much more difficult than catching a kickoff. Catching a kickoff is pretty simple. Because the wind can affect a punt so much more. By the way that you have to be able to read the ball in flight, the way the ball turns over. Is he right-footed? Is he left-footed? What hash is the punter punting the ball off of? Which way is he angled? There's a lot that they have to be able to judge as a punt returner. Kickoff returners now, they're going to be great decision makers for us. Again, with us finding our way through this new rule change that the league installed this past offseason. This can be a big deal to be a really good decision maker. But I think overall both of them have to have toughness. But specifically the kickoff returner, normally you want somebody who's a little bit more bigger, a little more physical, that can run through tackles. Punt returners, you like to be a little smaller, a little quicker, and a little faster. So, those are the physical qualifications you have to have.
What is that stood out about Charlie listening to this?
Well, I think his quickness really showed up to me, and that was more back at Iowa than it was at Purdue. He didn't do much of it at Purdue. I think he made the transfer from Iowa to Purdue to get an opportunity to play receiver, and I think that was a pretty good focus for him. I think he proved himself as a returner at Iowa, and you want to get more on his resume as a receiver. So I really studied a lot of his Iowa tape, and the thing that really showed up was his quickness. His ability to handle the ball was also very good too. He made good decisions. He was a good ball handler, but the quickness and the cutting ability is the thing that really showed up to me.
Where does Drew Chrisman stand on his training camp?
Well, he's right in the thick of the competition with Brad. Obviously the edge that he has on Brad is he has playing experience, and that's invaluable. They both obviously come from two very good programs. They both were successful at those programs. Drew would have a leg up in that regard because he has a working relationship with Cal and with Evan, and he has the trust of both of those guys, and both those guys trust in him. So, Brad's going to be in a dogfight to prove himself. And I think he'll certainly be up to that challenge. Otherwise, we wouldn't draft him. It'll be a good competition for both of those guys. But we start off here on equal footing, and we'll let those guys decide how it shakes out.
You've been in that coaching room for 2 decades on
Yeah.
Down Day.
Mm-hmm.
Will this be the toughest team to make in your tenure here?
Well, that's a good question. There's always great competition. That cut down day is the worst day of the year for me because, Zach or our scouting people have to tell these guys that unfortunately they're not going to be on our 53-man roster, and of course then the next guy they come to is me, and that's a very difficult day for me. It's the toughest day for me just to see some of these guys and tell them it's just not quite what we need right now. And but I do think it's going to be difficult, for a lot of these guys to make it. I think the opportunities that they have are a little bit more limited now. When we played 4 preseason games, they got more of an opportunity to see. That's why practices, are very critical for us now too, because the evaluation time is condensed a little bit in terms of what they do in game situations. The fact that our starters don't play a lot also helps them a little bit, though. They get actually more playing time to prove and show that. But, the window of practice, the window of play time is shrunken down. So, they have to be on point, especially these young guys. They have to prove what they can do in a short period of time. So I do think it's going to be difficult for some of these guys. The confidence that we have in the players we have returning and the players that we've even added is still very good. So we have a deep team.
This is definitely the second year in a row you've had a legit competition in punter, maybe 3 years in a row, you could say.
Yeah.
Do you like, at that specific position, do you like that competition going into camp?
I think competition always brings out the best in everybody. That's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I do think in this situation it does. We're at two completely different times, I guess. Maybe the previous 2 years we're talking about an older guy, a veteran guy, versus can the young guy come in and unseat him? And now we're really talking about two really unproven guys, and how they're going to stack up against each other. So. We've been very fortunate to have the luxury, for the past, 13 or 14 years, having the same long snapper and the same punter. And, we've interchanged some kickers here and there like every other team does. But we've been very fortunate to have had the two that we had forever and never really have to worry about that spot. But it's exciting to me to kind of start over again, really with, even Cal necessarily. I mean, the fact that he got to play, 15 or 16 games or whatever it was of the regular season was a big positive for him. But I still view him as a very, very young guy, and I'm still learning my way through dealing with Evan and how to coach him. But I'm really invigorated also by the competition we got going on at punter. It's going to be a really heightened showcase for those two guys.
On the topic of Cal and long snapper, last year in week 1, it was being really able to emerge as long snapper. Going into camp, how do those conversations happen? I saw you re-sign Wilcox today.
Yeah.
How do you decide who's the emergency long snapper?
Well, really, it's finding the guy who can do it, and the guy who has some level of experience doing that. And then the problem for me is it has to be multiple guys, because we're talking about trying to train somebody new to do that in the off season. We're talking about 90 players. Well, I got to have the foresight to try to figure out who's going to be on not the 53-man roster, who's going to be on the 48-man roster, who's going to be active on game day. Because it doesn't matter if the guy's on our practice squad or if the guy's inactive for the week. That guy's got to be on the active roster, whoever that may be. So, yeah, I think re-signing Mitch was him having the ability to do that was part of it. We have a couple of the guys who worked. Cal missed a couple weeks this offseason, so it was good to get an opportunity to see a couple other guys do it. Tanner Hudson did it a little bit. We've been trying to train some other players, position players, to do it, but trying to foreshadow who that's going to be is very, very, very difficult. So when you have a proven guy, meaning a backup, that's going to be on your 48-man roster, your game day roster, that's a huge thing.
How many players do you have tried out?
Well, I've been working with about 4 guys. There's a lot of guys that act like they want to do it until it's time. Then everybody kind of backs away because they know they're on stage, and and they only the only attention they ever get is bad attention. So. Yeah, we've been working with some guys. Trust me, I recognize it's always been a deficient thing for us. It's a difficult thing to try to work through, but obviously it's very important.
Sure. Dodge City, Carolina, and Baltimore like 3 lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
03, your first season here.
03 is my first season here, yes.
20 years now here.
Yeah, this is my 21st season. Yeah.
Personally, for you, your family,
Yeah.
this is a crazy business that
Yeah.
just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What is that number mean?
It means everything to me. It means a lot. It means that the level of trust that I have, that they have in me here, I think I don't take that lightly. That's something that's very, very, very important to me. It always has been, always will be. I'm indebted to the family here and the organization for what they've done for me and for my family. When I first moved here, my daughter was 1, and now she's a senior in college. And we just had 1 kid. Now I have 1 kid who just graduated from high school here, and another kid's going to be an 8th grader. So, and they've had the same set of friends their entire life. And for me to be in this profession and for them to have those things, that means everything to me. It means more than, it means a lot to me. And being able to have our roots here and this is home for us now, and it has been. I felt that way for a long time. So it's not something I take lightly.
Well, it's not just you. I mean, this organization has been very fortunate over the last, 4 or 5 years at this point in keeping not just yourself but the other coordinators here. What is it about this organization that's different? Because that's unusual for a coordinator.
Well, I think that they feel, obviously the first leader of this organization, Paul Brown, I know that the Brown family feels what coaching is like. Mike and all those people, they know what it's like to be a coach's son or a coach's kid. And when you disrupt that and have to move that, I think they felt that when it happened in Cleveland, and what a disruption to a family that is. And to be able to have that, and I think they understand what that feels like. And so the continuity that they maintain, like, it's not always, just to make a change is not always good for the sake of making a change. Sometimes, yes, there are times where things have gotten stale and we need to ramp things up and change, and they did that. They did it a couple years ago, and the fact that they, after a couple years here, things were rough until we tried to rebuild the roster and get things shaped the way we wanted to get them shaped in Zach's eye, and through a collective effort, I think we see the result of that now, and to see that they've stuck through that and believed in the vision that the team had, that Zach had, for the way that this place should look is very important to where we are right now.
You said you're still learning in some ways how to coach Evan.
Yeah.
What is the biggest thing you've learned about Evan over the last couple of years?
Well, I learned this very quickly, that he has a short memory, and the quicker that you can move on to the next kick is very important. And I've also learned he is a gamer. I learned that early on, that he just has a way to him, and that's probably what drew me to him is whenever he had his workout that year at the University of Florida, the way that I could see him rise up and compete, and I could feel that. And even though sometimes for us days out of practice are historically very good, there are days though that he has days where he's off, even pre-games where he's off. We had a playoff game against Tennessee. He was horrible in pre-game warm-up, and he comes back and kicks lights out, and he made the simple fact that he was missing half the kicks in pregame warm-up. He went inside, it's the shoes. And so he went back inside and changed his shoes and didn't miss a kick the rest of the day. The shoes didn't make a difference, but for what it did, And so I've learned to not worry a lot about things with him, that he'll get it figured out.
Kickers, huh?
Yeah, well.
Did you tell him it was the shoes, or?
No, he did. He told me it was the shoes. And like, okay, whatever it takes, bub. And, he has a very good field. He has a very good. He's very, very, very strong mentally. He's still really young. I mean, he came out as a junior, and but he's really, really mature and understands a great deal about being a kicker and what it means to be an effective kicker in crunch time. So I never ever worry about him in critical spots. He thrives in situations like that because he's so competitive.
On the punting battle, how much of it is data, tracking everything, and how much of it is feel?
That's a great question, because I think that came up a couple years ago, maybe even last year to a degree. I think they're probably equal parts, but that's a great point that you make. Some of it is we track everything from a data perspective, so the numbers are what the numbers are. But I've been in this business long enough. I've been around these guys long enough to know what it should look like and what it should feel like, not only from just a punting perspective, but just collectively how all three guys work together: the punter, or the kicker, or the snapper, how it should feel and what it should look like, how seamlessly it's going to be. I try to look ahead and see, all right, we're playing week 1, we're in Cleveland, and what the wind and the weather could be like, versus what it could be late in the year, and who do I want doing that. And it could look very different in August in Cincinnati compared to what it could be in, December or January in Kansas City. And that could be two completely different people. So I've got to try to formulate in my own mind, can I envision him doing what we need to do, not just now, but in the future. And so I think they're going to be equal parts. That's a great question.
How much does holding go into it?
Oh, it's a huge part of it also. I think it was a direct figure in, earlier last year. I felt like that with Kevin and Clark, we had such a good thing going. The way that you win games is that you score points. And Evan had come off such a strong rookie season that I didn't want to disrupt him, even if that meant we had to, deal with some punting things that we needed to deal with from a field position perspective. But it's going to be a huge part. But I do believe, coming out of camp last year, Drew did a great job of making himself relevant in the holding portion and developing the confidence of Evan. And so I feel really good about where that stands now. Brad held for the Lou Groza winner in Moody, so he does a fantastic job too. So I feel really good about both those spots.